This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Sunday. I am your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. Today, we are breaking down a Jets loss. They fall in their season opener to the Pittsburgh Steelers, 34-32 at MetLife Stadium. I think this game showed that in many ways, things have not changed between 2024 and 2025. But it also showed some things might be changing. So how do we make sense of a contradictory statement like that? Well, first, let's talk about what went wrong for the New York Jets. We saw a lot of the same things that plagued them in 2024, plagued them again once today. And the Pittsburgh Steelers had a quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, who took advantage of it. Rodgers threw 4 touchdown passes. He led a game-winning drive. If you're like me, you were watching this game. You're watching Rodgers play spectacular football, and you're saying, where was this last year? Why did this version of Aaron Rodgers not grace us with his presence more frequently? We saw a few glimpses, the season finale against Miami, where he also threw 4 touchdown passes, a great game against Jacksonville. But this was not the version of Rodgers we saw frequently last year. And I think that there's a reason for that. The Jets were busting coverages left and right in this game. It was a really sloppy game for the Jets in a number of areas, but particularly on the defensive side of the ball. How many times did a guy run wide open? And if you're a Jets fan, you probably have a pretty good scouting report on Rodgers right now. You know that, he's not a guy with a lot of mobility left. He's not a guy who really stands tall in the face of a heavy pass rush at this point. He's not a guy who really can create much on his own. He's not a guy who at this point is even throwing guys open all that frequently. The arm strength's not what it used to be. But there's nobody who processes the game better. And you can get away with busted coverages against a lot of quarterbacks in this league. You will not get away with a busted coverage against Aaron Rodgers. He will make you pay every single time. And every single time the Jets busted a coverage in this game, Aaron Rodgers made them pay. Now, can we excuse it? It is game one of a new system. So I guess that's a factor. But you know what? That we weren't talking about one busted coverage. Steelers receivers were running open up and down the field. And it felt like there was a real lack of communication for the Jets in their defensive backfield. And there were also missed tackles. There was one key missed tackle by Tony Adams in the first half. Jets get off the field. Jets force a punt if Tony Adams makes that tackle. He doesn't. The Steelers end up scoring on that drive. You want to talk penalties? 7 penalties for the Jets, 74 yards. Really bad call on Brandon Stevens that gave the Steelers pretty much a free 20 yards at a critical point in the game. A key penalty on Quincy Williams in the third quarter when the Jets were rolling. The Jets are up 9. They have all the momentum. The Jets get a stop on first down. They force a negative play on first down, and Quincy Williams hits the ball carrier out of bounds, gives the Steelers a free 15-yard penalty. They move the ball forward. They score. Then Xavier Gipson fumbles the ensuing kickoff. Xavier Gipson, I don't know why this guy is still on the team. I criticized the Jets on cutdown day for keeping Xavier Gipson around. You probably agreed with me because there is no earthly reason Xavier Gipson should still be on the team. The Jets suggested they didn't want to give the job to Jamal Pritchett, a rookie, because he had a few issues dropping punts. Okay, that's fine. I understand. It's a risky thing to put a rookie out there in a situation like that. But you know what? Jamal Pritchett and Xavier Gipson aren't the only 2 options to be your return guys. There are other players available in the NFL. If you want a reliable veteran, if you're maybe not valuing explosiveness, get somebody who will hold on to the ball, because we've seen Xavier Gipson fumble the ball over and over. It's not like Xavier Gipson's been some sure-handed guy over the last couple of years. Really sloppy game by the Jets. And I think in many ways, they resembled their 2024 selves. And they had numerous opportunities to put this game away. I think there were a number of chances, number of plays to be made the Jets did not make. Stevens, the guy I mentioned, he was torched all game, committed a big penalty, dropped a gimme interception in the fourth quarter, kind of slipped on it, had an opportunity to put the game away. The Jets got the ball back with the lead in the fourth quarter, around 5 minutes left. The Jets had run the ball effectively all game. One of the things about being a great run team is picking up yards is essential. Running the ball consistently is essential. But one of the most important components of being a great run team is when you get the ball with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter and you got a lead, you don't let the other team get the ball back. Jets had an opportunity to do it. Jets did not get the job done. Steelers got the ball back. They went down the field and scored. In a game like this, you can't really look at any individual play because there are lots of different factors that happen. And some of them are beyond your control. I mean, on the last drive, the Steelers caught a pass where the ball bounced 3 times off 2 different receivers. And it turned into a positive play. It turned into a catch that got the Steelers on the outer fringes of field goal range. The Pittsburgh kicker, Chris Boswell, then hits a 60-yarder. Sometimes you lose because the ball just doesn't bounce your way. Sometimes you lose because there's a miracle catch where it comes down to luck. Sometimes you lose because the other team's kicker hits a 60-yarder. I can live with the fluke plays. What frustrates me is when the Jets go out there and beat themselves, because this coaching change was supposed to bring more discipline. It was supposed to bring a team that played smarter. And through game one under Aaron Glenn, I don't think we've seen that. Now, it's only one game, and we know that in order to undo all of the issues that we had with this team, it was going to take more than one game. We knew that the Jets, were not going to be able to fix all of their problems this offseason. If this was a Super Bowl or bust year the way it was in 2023 or 2024, this would be a devastating loss. If the Jets had realistic playoff aspirations this year, this is the type of game you look back at the end of the season. If you miss the playoff by a game or you lose the division by a game, and you look back at everything that went wrong in this game, all the things you could have controlled, and you have a lot of regrets. The Jets, we know they're a young team. This is a youth movement, and I'm not saying that you completely excuse everything. I'm not saying that, you avoid frustration completely. I'm saying that, there's some nuance here. There, on some level, are some things that you have to look past. The goal for the Jets this year, as much as anything, is to improve over the course of the season. But you want to see improvement. And I don't think you wanted to see the team come out and make this many mistakes in week one, because in many ways, I felt like the Jets beat themselves. The 7 penalties for 74 yards, the dropped interception, the fumble, and again, all the busted coverages. When the Jets actually played straight up defense and forced the Steelers to make a play, if they forced a receiver to get open on his own accord without busting a coverage, if they forced Rodgers to stand in the pocket against pressure, the Steelers had a difficult time executing. It sounds silly to say in a game where the other team put up 34 points to suggest that their offense may have had a difficult time executing. But when the Jets did not make an error, Pittsburgh had a difficult time. The Jets, could not get out of their own way in this game. In many ways, it was shades of 2024. The question is not so much whether the Jets failed in this game. The question is what they're going to do about it going forward. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, it's not all bleak. There was one huge difference between the 2024 Jets and the Jets we saw on the field in game one of 2025. The Jets may have found an offensive identity, and it was a stellar game by the new quarterback. That's ahead here on this Sunday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right means cashing in. With football back, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. PrizePicks is a fun way to stay locked in for the season. It's quick, easy, and a great way to follow along with football. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDONNFL, to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is also brought to you by Game Time. NFL season is back, and there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. As I said, I've used Game Time myself, not just for the NFL, but I've used it for college football, for tennis. I've even used it to go see a couple shows on Broadway. And I love that they show you the view from your seat. You get a picture of what it's going to look like from your seat before you arrive. So no surprises when you get to your venue, no obstructed seats, none of that. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, promo code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, one word with no space for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Hey, Locked On Jets fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code Touchdown and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already need. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive by. Download the free Upside app now by using my limited time promo code Touchdown for a limited time 25-cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code Touchdown. Offer varies by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. This is the Locked On Jets podcast. On this Sunday, we are recapping a New York Jets defeat. The Jets fall to 0-1 with a 34-32 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mentioned in the first segment that in many ways, this game resembled the Jets of 2024. Lots of really sloppy play, lots of mental errors, lots of frustrating football. In many ways, the Jets beat themselves as much, if not more, than the Steelers beat them. So there's a lot to fix for Aaron Glenn moving forward, heading into week 2. But there's one distinct way that this loss was different from what we're accustomed to, not just in 2024, but over the last decade and a half, because the Jets have lost a lot of games over the last 15 years. And usually the losses take on one of two tones. Either everybody plays poorly or the defense plays great and the offense lets them down. This game is the rare Jets game in recent memory where the offense played great and the Jets lost because the defense let them down, and the special teams with that Xavier Gipson fumble. The Jets showed that there might be an identity with this team. And we knew heading into the season that the Jets wanted to run the ball. It's one thing to say we're hoping to be a great running team. It's another thing to go out there and execute it. And I'm not a believer in moral victories. I don't think you look at a game like this and say it was okay to lose. I do think there's a difference between saying it was okay to lose and saying, you know what, even though we lost, there is something positive we can take away from this game. And the positive comes from the performance of the offense. And I'm going to say particularly the offensive line. The offensive line encouraged me more than anything because we knew that the offensive line was going to be what would really decide whether this offense could function or not. And we knew that there was a lot of upside with this offensive line. But with very young, inexperienced players at tackle, it could go either way. You could see a scenario where the offensive line looked really good. You could see a scenario where the offensive line looked really bad. Now, I don't want to read too much into one game. We certainly know that week 1 is not always indicative of what's to come. But I would also say that this is going to be one of the more talented defensive fronts the New York Jets face in 2025. And I think the offensive line did more than hold its own in this game. And it's not that I want to take away credit from some of the guys who played well, because there were lots of very good offensive performances by the New York Jets in this game. You know, we could talk about the quarterback, Justin Fields, who 16 for 22, 218 yards and a touchdown. And then he added 12 carries for 48 yards. Very encouraging start by Justin Fields. We know Justin can play at a high level. The question is, can he do that consistently? Good start for Justin, though. Breece Hall, I was joking during the game that 2022 called and they wanted their version of Breece Hall back because this is as good as Breece Hall's looked since that rookie season in 2022. I had kind of given up that on us ever seeing this version of Breece Hall again because we know Breece has speed. We always know he's the big play threat. But the Breece Hall of 2023, and especially the Breece Hall of 2024, was a very indecisive back behind the line of scrimmage. He liked to dance. He kind of waited for the perfect hole to open up, and it would never open up. He'd go down easily on contact. And there's been talk around this team since the spring and you've heard the talk from him that Breece Hall is a very motivated player. He did not get a new contract the way Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner did this offseason. He wants that contract. And he looked as decisive as he has at any point in the last 3 years. The numbers were excellent. 19 carries, 107 yards, a 5.6 average per rush. I mean, he looked like a number one back. I won't lie. I had settled into the idea that the best way for the Jets to handle their backfield was perhaps a timeshare between Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. I wasn't sure if Breece could be a lead back. I don't want to radically change my view based on one game, but I will say this is the first time in a really long time that I left a game feeling like, you know what, Breece Hall can be a difference maker on offense. That he's not just going to be a guy who hits the occasional home run, but he's going to be a guy who's consistent on a play-to-play basis. This looked like a different player than we saw last year. And, you know, even in the passing game, Garrett Wilson, an excellent performance, 7 catches for 95 yards. You know, I know like he took a big hit from Jalen Ramsey on the Jets' last offensive play, didn't come up with that ball, but still an outstanding performance by Garrett Wilson. You know, you saw the connection was still there that he had with Justin Fields in college. You know, everything that needed to go well for the Jets to be a productive offensive team, you saw in this game. And the hope is that they will build on this going forward. And Justin Fields will get all the headlines, he'll get all the credit, and deservedly so. It was a very good game for Justin. Tanner Engstrand, he's going to get a lot of love this week. I mean, he's the coach. I think when your offensive line's blocking well and your backs are hitting their holes, it's kind of easy to look like a genius play caller. Not that I want to take away from Engstrand, but I got the feeling this was a lot more about execution than it was, you know, any creativity in the play calls. Hey, you know what? Sometimes offensive coaches get a little too cute. They get away from what's working. You know, sometimes the run works and coaches get away from it. So kudos to Engstrand for not doing that. But for me, the story of this game, as much as it was Justin Fields, was the play up front for this Jets offensive line, because you didn't know exactly how it was going to turn out. It had the pieces to be good, but you know, there had to be skepticism, because it's one thing to say there's potential, but potential stops mattering once you get to the first regular season game. And this year, when we got to the first regular season game, the Jets faced a very, very talented front seven, which the Pittsburgh Steelers have. And I think they more than held their own. The Jets were able to move the ball. They were able to put up 32 points. It's not a moral victory to say, you know what, this offensive line playing well could have big implications for the Jets going forward in a positive way. And despite the fact you lost the game, and despite your fact you're frustrated because the Jets did a lot of really sloppy things, you still can feel encouraged, and you still can have hope that maybe this team can beat expectations, because most important part of that formula is be able to run the ball, and running the ball requires you to block, and the Jets blocked well in this game. Anyway, that's all for our Sunday episode of Locked On Jets. We'll be back tomorrow with our regular Monday show. We'll break down what happened on the field at MetLife Stadium in more detail. I can't wait to chat with you then.